and it hits me, oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
You know, there's explanation for everything that occurred in the Rendlesham Forest incident that doesn't involve aliens at all.
It was completely silent. It comes right over our heads.
He saw a classic flying saucer really standing in the clearing.
He turned over to my father and held his hand, and he looked in his eyes and he said, "We're not alone."
Oh my gosh, this is that triangle.
Welcome to Podcast UFO for our live show. We're live every Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Please remember to visit the website podcastufo.com for past episodes, blogs, and forums. During the show, feel free to participate live in our chat room. And don't forget to like us on our very active Facebook page.
Hello, and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host. And tonight we have an interesting show this evening with David Halperin, because he was a teenage UFO investigator all the way back in the 1960s. And then he taught Jewish history in the religious studies at the Department of the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And so with that, over the years, he has come to have some interesting ideas on what the UFO subject actually could be about. It's really quite fascinating. I'm really looking forward to asking him some questions about when he was researching and a lot more and what he thinks the whole thing's about today. It's always interesting to get points of view like that. And before that, we have Alejandro coming up with from Open Minds TV with the UFO updates. Also, I wanted to let you know that I've been saying all along that we have our show is live on the Dark Matter Digital Network, and that's every Thursday night from 10 to midnight. It's also, if you want to watch it for free, you can watch it, of course, live always at usually 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Today we're starting an hour early, and that's on either YouTube or it's on our website. And I'm sorry I'm stumbling right here because I just need to get this radio station that I'm on. And pardon me just one second. And that is, okay, here we go. It's on Outworld Fleet Radio. If you want to listen to the show for free, the entire show, you can listen to Outworld Fleet Radio. And that's usually Saturday evenings at 6 p.m. The full show will play on that. So if you can't listen on Thursdays or listen live, you can always listen to that show on Saturday, Outworld Fleet Radio. So keep that in mind. And if you support the show, thank you so much. And all it takes is $2 or more a month, and you can find that information on our website, which means you can play it in your media player, the full shows. You can also listen to it online if you'd like, and all the archives going all the way back about 100 some odd shows. So I think we have 260 shows in total, and about 100 some odd shows are 2-hour shows. Alejandro, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hello, I am doing well. It's funny, watching you set this up, and I hope listeners appreciate, all the work you do to make sure you can do this show live, because it's like terror. You can tell that your heart is in your throat. You're hoping that you're pushing all the right buttons and everything's going to work. And luckily, once in a while, it does work.
Every once in a while, we get it right. It's usually by accident. But yeah. It is nerve-wracking. And something a little behind the scenes, I had Ben Moss on last week. Mm-hmm. And I called him early at 7:25, I think it was. The show was to air at 8 o'clock. 1 minute before the show, we finally got his Skype working and his microphone and his camera all working.
Oh, my gosh.
It was actually 1 minute before 8 o'clock. It finally all happened. But until then, he was using Skype off a web browser. And we couldn't.
Oh, my gosh.
I had no idea. I said, are you sure? I couldn't understand what was going on. So anyway, we finally got it together. Like I said, that was about as harrowing as it gets.
Yeah. Pretty scary stuff.
Right. So, and I've been telling this guy that has the radio station he plays our show on, that I'll announce it. And here I am scrambling right now. You saw me scrambling looking for it.
Yeah.
So, David Dixon, that's his name. Thanks so much, David, for playing our show on your radio station. So, and your show, Open Minds TV, I just want to announce that last couple days ago, you and I did the show together, the whole entire show, and it was a lot of fun. And I've gotten some really nice comments from people on that. And
yeah, I've gotten some good feedback too, so which is nice because it was just a couple weeks ago. Someone was like, "You should get to the interviews a little more quickly."
Right, that's right. Yeah.
And of course, for everybody's got their opinion.
That's right. Yeah, I've had people say, "Oh, you don't need the news at all. Why do you need the news? Just go into," But most people
I think it's important.
I do too. I mean, what's going on, and not only that, we talk about other subjects, not just UFOs, but interesting like space topics.
It's important to know what's going on right now and know a little bit more about the stories that are out there. So, and which is what I'll talk about. I'll touch on one of the stories that we talked about the other day, and then a couple newer ones and some updates, some things you need to know about some of these stories that are out there.
Right, right. And welcome back from Budapest. We didn't have you last week, of course, because you were in Budapest. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. That's amazing on the Mars set and all that. So I don't know if that's what you want to lead off with, or it's up to you.
Sure, yeah. It was a lot of fun. This National Geographic show, Mars, luckily I get to go to movies and interview some directors and writers and some talent, some actors and actresses regarding science in movies. And this is through ZoomWorks. This is this promotion company that likes to promote science in entertainment. And so I got to go out there to Budapest on National Geographic, paid for it to promote their season 2 of this show, Mars, which is awesome because it's half documentary, half drama. And just because, someone wants me to cover something doesn't mean that I'm going to say, oh, it's a great thing, that I loved it, because a lot of these movies and stuff, I'm pretty bad. I don't like a lot of them. But this one is awesome because it's real science about going to Mars. And so I highly recommend it. One season has been out. They're short seasons, like 6 episodes. Season 2 is coming up. And you could go to my Facebook page. Just look up Alejandro Rojas, and you'll see some of my pictures from my trip and everything. And then I'll have stories up on the Huffington Post in the next few weeks as well.
Now, it's absolutely beautiful in Budapest. I've heard a number of people say very historic. And so I was watching your pictures. You really had, you were in another movie set, and but you had a trip on the Danube and all that. Real nice.
So, yeah, lots of time. Most of it, luckily we kind of get wined and dined a bit, and we get to hang out with the actors and actresses and on these things. But I was making sure to take photos to share the experience. And it is amazing out there. The history, the architecture, it's absolutely incredible. And then at Corda Studios, where they shoot this, they shoot other things. So, like The Last Kingdom, there's some scenes from Vikings, Marco Polo, The Borgias, Emerald City, Hellboy, The Martian, the movie The Martian. So these are some of the stuff that's been shot at the same studio where they have outdoor and indoor set. So yeah, I took some pictures and videos of that as well.
Did they actually have like red colored sand? I know that's kind of probably a
no.
lay
Well,
question.
you know what? I posted some videos from the set, the outdoor set, or I posted a video and then also some pictures from the outdoor set. So no, the ground is not red, so that's done later. They can do amazing things later, kind of like you. People might not know you're behind a green screen. Sorry if I'm, revealing anything, but yeah, so like they have similar technology to you have, and they do have these gigantic green screens outside that they're shooting against, and so it's pretty crazy. So they make the Mars stuff later. So in my videos, you'll see bushes and stuff like that, but of course, there are no bushes that we're aware of on Mars.
No, you never know. The rover might take a picture of one sooner or later. Hey, so where can someone catch this series?
It's National Geographic, the National Geographic channel. So another series that's really cool. And I think that right now it's not available. I guess it did really, really well. So they're a little stashed with it. But the second season will come out, and hopefully there'll be more streaming. I got it on iTunes for $10, and it was well worth the $10. But another show that's out there, and I think it's streaming for free on the Nat Geo app, is Genius. And that's about Einstein. And that is another really, really good production.
Oh, wow. Wow, that sounds great. Sounds great. So, welcome back. We're glad to have you back. What's going on in the UFO world?
UFOs. So this is, I think, the most exciting story going on right now. And this is these new mysterious signals that have been detected. And it's exciting for a number of reasons. There's a lot to it, so I'll try to go through it quickly. First of all, these things are called FSBs, or FRBs, fast radio bursts. So they're very quick signals. They're only like a millisecond, but they're very bright that they've been detecting. They've detected these over the last 15 years. However, there are a few of them that are more interesting than others because they're repeating. So radio signals happen, different cosmic events cause radio signals. But if it's repeating, that typically, that's kind of the marker for potentially demonstrating intelligence. So that's why those are important. And there's one in particular that they've gotten repeated signals. So there's this group called Breakthrough Initiative, and there's a guy named Yuri Milner. He's a billionaire in Russia, and a lot of billionaires are throwing their money at space. There's Bezos and Elon Musk and Bigelow, but they're trying to go to space or build some space hotels and stuff like that. But this guy's looking for aliens. So he is listening for radio signals. He wants to send out these tiny spacecraft to detect alien life or the potential for it in Alpha Centauri. And then he had another one where he was going to send out messages, but it seemed like Stephen Hawking talked him out of that one because Stephen Hawking is afraid that, aliens will come and eat us or something if we send out any signals. But what they did in this Breakthrough Initiative is they took this Green Bank telescope and they aimed it at this one particular place where they had gotten these repeated signals, and they received more, sure enough. So they received 15 more signals, and that's significant because prior to this, there were only a couple dozen that were out there. This area they've been able to examine, and there shouldn't be anything out there making repeated signals. So the speculation exists that it could be due to some sort of civilization or technology. So these radio bursts are really interesting. It's really making the news right now. And it is an open question. Some of the news sources have said, well, they've ruled out aliens. Not really. And the Breakthrough Initiative makes that point that no, it hasn't been ruled out. We're not sure what it is because all the speculation about what could possibly be creating these signals wouldn't create repeated signals like they're receiving.
Now, do you happen to know, is any telescope or telescope array going to focus and just stay, focused on that particular area at this point?
Not at this point. And, it's really, it costs a lot of money to rent these gigantic telescopes to use them for this sort of work. And Milner has put forward, I think, $100 million to do this over the next 10 years.
And that's just to rent the telescope.
That's just to rent it, to aim it where they want, and this is one of the places. But I'm sure after this news, there will be more of an effort to continue to listen to those signals to figure out what it is. Nobody has announced any such project that I'm aware of right now, but I'm sure it'll be coming. And I'm sure Milner and Breakthrough Initiative is going to spend more time examining that as well because, one of the things Milner's doing is sending all these little tiny spacecraft out into space. That's what they want to do, and it'll be powered by lasers. There'll be these little sails. But people have speculated maybe there's a giant sail spacecraft, and this laser that we're seeing is, propelling this giant sail spacecraft from another place. Although one thing to note is, should we be afraid of this big spacecraft coming our way?
The mothership.
The mothership. However, one thing to note is that these signals since they were generated so far away, were probably generated millions of years ago when
Right.
we were just wee little microbes swimming around in the ocean. So,
Tadpoles. Yeah.
yeah, little tadpoles, even less than tadpoles. So it was a long time ago that these signals were generated and began their journey for these wavelengths to reach the planet Earth. So it's probably no current immediate threat, even if it is technology. But if we're able to detect and figure out that there was this ancient, technological civilization millions of years ago, of course, the implications are incredible.
Now, I could almost see that there could be a little bit of jealousy from, say, the SETI Institute. Do you happen to know, like, Seth Shostak's opinion on these radio bursts? Has he given any opinion out, as far as you know?
SETI has chimed in, and they have been on the side of that we don't know what these are yet, that it's still a possibility that there's extraterrestrial in nature. So, yeah, they're very interested in it. One thing about SETI is SETI is the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. And a lot of times we use the term SETI to represent the SETI Institute, which is who Shostak works for, who the movie by Carl Sagan, Contact, was all about. They're the effort to listen to these signals, and that's what most people know. But actually, the SETI community is anybody out there looking for these extraterrestrial intelligence. So that it is a broader term, and even though Breakthrough is not part of the SETI initiative or the SETI Institute, they're separate. It's still a SETI project. Technically, so that's the difference. But yeah, the SETI folks are all really excited about it.
Well, that's great. Well, that is really interesting because so far it can't be explained on anything natural the way it is occurring and reoccurring.
Yeah,
so,
at least not that we're aware of.
Yeah.
So there's got to be more work to look into it to figure that out.
Yeah, because so far it's always been, they've always been able to explain it, eventually. So, maybe this could as well, but it would be such a coincidence that it could happen. It would be a very strange, anomaly, I would think.
And the potential's exciting, just like, the star Tabby star which is a star that's pulsating or at a regular frequency and they can't understand why, because it doesn't seem to be a planet. Both of these things are potential extraterrestrial in nature, and what's great is it's got scientists speculating that, wow, what if this is an alien civilization? And they're excited about that potential.
Right. Has there been any more development on that, on Tabby Star?
Tabby Star, there's been something recent, but it was something along the lines of they still don't know what the heck it is. So pretty exciting.
Yeah, that's good, as long as it doesn't just fade away and nobody talks about it.
I know.
Yeah, which could very well happen.
Yeah.
How about you in the UFO world? Anything going on?
In the UFO world, yeah, I just want to touch on a few things very quickly here. We did post a sighting today at openminds.tv. This was the witness called it a large spherical object the size of a helicopter. The witness was in Portugal. They were hiking. They took a couple photos of the object. And they even called it at one point kind of an irregular shaped object or irregular sphere. And the photos are luckily pretty high quality, so you could zoom in, and it is weird. Typically when you get something like this, you assume that they're balloons. They often turn out to be like a Mylar balloon. But a Mylar balloon is usually a circle or a star, or we've seen letters, different shapes. And this one's a little weird. It's really kind of you can't tell what the shape is. It almost looks like kind of a horseshoe with maybe something that is luminous in the middle of it. So it's a really weird shape, and I can't figure out what it is. So it's one of those where, I'm, of course, hesitant to jump on the alien spacecraft bandwagon, but I love to send these stories out and kind of crowdsource them. So because then everybody tries to figure out what it is, and there's some super smart people like in our Open Minds UFO News group and some of the other online groups who are able to figure it out. So I can't wait to see what people say, because this is an unusual one. And I'm not sure what the heck this one is. So it's really, I think, an interesting picture. Have you gotten a chance to take a look at that one?
No, unfortunately, I have not. I didn't see that. Just got rolled in from Boston a few minutes ago. And so, getting back to the people that post their opinion, do you have some people that come in with a really strong and each time that can oftentimes crack what they're seeing?
Well, we talk a lot about Mark D'Antonio, who's
Yep.
the MUFON photo analyst, and he's always great. Of course, he's very thorough. So if he tackles something, he usually spends a lot of time at it, but he's a busy guy.
Yeah.
So he doesn't have a lot of time to do that. So when he chimes in, it's always really good. Let's see. We've got another guy named Finn Hanley who's really good in the group. I think there's a website, UFO of Interest. There's a guy who is a little on the skeptical side for me, but I think his name is Scott Brando. But he's often very good and able to crack some of these cases. So I apologize because I'm leaving some names out. There's a lot of really good ones out there. People who just put in some work to really figure it out. So, and you put me on the spot, and I know I forgot some people I shouldn't have. But yeah, there's a lot of great ones.
It makes you wonder.
But a couple other.
Go ahead.
I just want to make sure I get these in because I know we're running long.
No,
on
that's
time.
okay. So hang on just 1 second. So I'm just wondering, like, if you could go back in time and all the unexplained UFOs, like in Project Blue Book, the 701 or whatever there is in there, if you could go back in time and really investigate each of these, I wonder how many you could call out, with what the technology we have today, and also with people like you're talking about. I imagine there would be a percentage that would be able to be explained.
I'm sure there would be, and some of them would probably be a surprise.
Yeah.
I mean, even myself investigating big cases, often I'm disappointed because you follow that thread and you find some dubious beginnings, or unfortunately, you find out that someone did figure it out. And a lot of times these guys who figure it out don't get a lot of attention. The people who say it's not figured out get a lot of attention. For instance, the lights over Mexico that Jaime Maussan was given by the Air Force, those lights were figured out pretty quickly by a pilot in Mexico who did some amazing work. And he was, unfortunately, able to track them back to those oil rigs. A lot of people say, it couldn't be that.
That's
but
right.
He's got the math and the trajectories to prove definitively those, that's what it was. They match up perfectly with the position of the aircraft and the position of the oil rigs. But he's someone where people don't remember this guy. So sometimes people reproduce his work and do the same thing. That's happened before. We've got a video with Ben McGee doing this on the site, kind of recreating his work. But that's just an example of, unfortunately, when people figure out something, they don't get the attention of so much as the people who keep claiming it's a mystery.
Yeah, that's too bad. I like when things are put to bed, and sometimes it has to do with someone working on a book or something, and they don't want the truth to get out there, which is very unfortunate. It was kind of like my focus last week on some of the topics we touched on, but yeah. All right, so you said you had a couple of other things going on.
Yeah, a couple of others. Here's one that's unfortunately another one that was figured out. So, and I can't remember who it is, but on the Open Mind UFO News group on Facebook, we posted links to it too. But there's been a lot of news about this UFO being seen in California in the San Gabriel Valley. It was on the local Fox. It's gotten all over the place. It's gone viral in the last day or two. But that was figured out. It's a balloon, and people were able to zoom in, and it's a Mylar balloon. And it's not surprising. Mylar balloons, the writing on them often looks weird, makes a balloon look weird. The shapes are sometimes weird. They move strangely in the wind. But if you see the pictures of the balloon next to what it is and some of the zoom in that people have done, it's definitively a balloon. So sorry to burst your balloon on that one.
Yeah.
But the other story, which is kind of funny that's out there, is this nudist colony. This is a story you in particular would love. But this nudist colony in North Wales keeps reporting UFO sightings. So
why are they looking up?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. And it would make sense because they don't have to abduct the people to kind of see what, study our physiology. They can just go to this nudist colony and
sure.
zoom in.
Yeah.
Look at the different people parts. And write it down. Humans have these several appendages. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Or I guess if some people are into nudism and UFO sighting, it's a perfect place, perfect vacation for someone.
There you go. So actually, is that kind of the end of the story on that one, or they're seeing?
That's the end of the story on that one. But that's pretty good, right? Nudists and UFOs.
Yeah.
What more do you want?
Yeah, that's great. All right. Well, hey, thank you so much. That's it for today.
My pleasure. That is it for today. And of course, you can see all these at openminds.tv.
All right, and we'll have you back next week. Thanks so much. It's been really nice talking to you, and I'm glad you're back.
Thank you. I'm glad to be back, although it was a lot of fun. Gorgeous out there. Please go look at my pictures on Facebook.
Right. Okay, I'm going to attempt to hang you up. We'll see what happens. All right, I'll talk to you next week. All right, so that is it, and now that brings us to our guest. Thank you for joining us, David. How are you?
Just great, and thank you for having me here.
Yes, I'm actually pretty excited because of the topic. I actually listened to one of your shows that you did with Kevin Randall. I listened to part of that. Kevin is a friend of our shows, been on a number of times, a friend of the show here, and it's always interesting. I really respect his work and everything, and it was good to hear you on that show in particular. So you have been an author, and you also, this is your only your only book, right? Or is this your only book?
Well, not exactly. I published a whole string of books ranging from the hyper-technical down to the semi-popular on Jewish mysticism and messianism. But this Journal of a UFO Investigator was the first time I tried to do a novel.
Oh, wow. Oh, it's a novel.
Yes.
Oh, wow. How about that? Now, you actually got into investigating UFOs at a very young age. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I'd like very much to talk about it. I was 12 going on 13. A friend of mine and I were working jointly on an extra credit paper for a science class. We were both in the 8th grade. And we went to the Levittown Public Library, and they had 3 books on UFOs. One was Gray Barker's They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers. Another was Carl Jung's Flying Saucers, a modern myth of things seen in the skies. The third, which I'm not going to talk much about, was Frank Scully's Behind the Flying Saucers. But I borrowed Gray Barker's They Knew Too Much and took it home and started reading it. And I hadn't read more than a chapter or two before I wanted to hide under my bed.
Uh-huh.
It's a very, very scary book. It starts out with the Flatwoods Monster.
Oh, yeah.
And then goes on to the 3 men in black who terrorize Albert K. Bender into silence. That he has discovered the secret of the flying saucers, and they come to silence him quite effectively.
Wow. Yeah, I could see why that would be a little scary.
Oh, yeah. But also, I believed it. Absolutely. And looking back, I want to know why I believed it. I mean, I could easily have written this off as a clumsy attempt at science fiction masquerading as reality, and yet I didn't. I was absolutely convinced. I was absolutely convinced that there were flying saucers in our skies, and I was absolutely convinced that there were the three men in black who silenced those who'd found the terrible truth. And indeed, if you asked me why I believed in flying saucers, probably the most accurate answer was that I believed in flying saucers because I believed in the men in black. If there were no flying saucers, after all, what were they trying to suppress? Now, why did I believe in the men in black? And I think now, looking back more than 50 years, I can give an answer. That I knew the men in black from personal experience. In my household, we had a terrible secret that must not be spoken. And this secret was that my mother was not just a semi-invalid, as we called her, but she was slowly dying from progressive heart disease. She did, in fact, die when I was 16. I knew she was dying, but I didn't know I knew. The fiction had to be maintained. So when Gray Barker wrote about a terrible secret and its shadowy enforcers, there was something inside me that said, yes, this is the truth. Now, as you probably know, Gray Barker himself had a terrible secret. He was a closeted gay man in 1950s West Virginia. The three men in black must have been regular visitors to his psyche. So when he wrote about them, he wrote with a terrible authenticity that found its echo in me.
Wow. So you're the men in black. I didn't actually realize that people were writing about them that long ago.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Gray Barker was the beginning, although he did have a forerunner. There was a man in black in 1947 who visited Harold Dahl. You know the Maury Island story?
Yes. Yeah.
That he took a Dahl, at least according to Dahl's account, out to breakfast and told Dahl what no human being could have known, the story of those donut-shaped UFOs that fell, that one of which disintegrated over Puget Sound. Okay, so the man in black goes back to the beginning of the UFO era, and as the folklorist, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing this correctly, Reichowitz, and at the moment I'm blanking on his first name, as he wrote about, the men in black, or the man in black, has an august history stretching back to the witch trials.
Really?
That the men in black appear, the man in black appears to the witches, and they sign their names in blood in his black book. I translated a Hebrew text from the beginning of the 18th century describing an incident that happened in 1683 in which the narrator saw three men come down from the moon who visit him in his bedroom and torment him, first with hideous blasphemies and then with a fever. And in one version of his story, he speaks of them as three men dressed in black. So here we've got the three men in black in 1683. Do the arithmetic. Bender was visited by them in 1953. These are entities that keep recurring. Barker put them in what I would call their modern canonical form, from which Hollywood drew on them about 40 years afterward.
Interesting. Wow. So you actually did some investigating on UFOs back in the, early on, right?
Yeah.
And one of them, I heard you talk with Kevin Randall, was a New Jersey case that ended up being a hoax.
Yes.
But can you talk about some of the ones you've, and of course, I want to talk more later on about your thoughts of the connection and sort of like with religion and UFOs, because I think you have a really interesting philosophy on that. But let's go first to some of the investigations that you actually did.
Yes, well, Glassboro, New Jersey. I mean, I was just ecstatic when that happened. It was on, I think, September 5th, 1964, and that it was a location that I could reach by bus. And I went and I investigated it. A UFO had landed, supposedly, and left 4 markings in the ground, a central crater, and then having rested on a tripod, it pressed 3 holes in a triangular pattern around that central crater. Now, I will not. I won't keep you hanging about or anything. We know that was a hoax.
Uh-huh.
The hoaxer tried to sell his story to a Philadelphia newspaper, was arrested, convicted of, I think, nuisance. I don't know what the charge was, but I think he paid a fine of $10, and he appeared in the same newspapers. There are photos of him with the police lieutenant who nabbed him. The same newspapers that had promoted the original Glassboro landing. I should say just a few of them, just a couple of the Philadelphia papers. The Glassboro landing, nobody remembers it now because it was certainly a hoax, but it was, I mean, I have a huge list of newspapers that ran the story, and was actually on the morning news on WOR radio. So this made an impact. Now, for a long time, I thought there was nothing to be learned from Glassboro. Now I'm convinced there is. Why? Because when I published a blog post on my adventures in Glassboro, that I got an email from a lady who said it was definitely not a hoax. Why? Because the morning after it happened, the Air Force came into town in full force, clamped down on Glassboro, and people were not allowed to move out of their driveways.
Well, could that have been for the purpose of they thought something actually happened there, so they were investigating it?
It never happened.
I know it never happened, but do you think do you think the Air Force assumed that something may have happened?
No, the clampdown never happened. Because I was in Glassboro the weekend afterwards. Nobody breathed a whisper to me about any of that.
Okay.
So where did the lady get her story? And it suddenly dawned on me. In June of 1967, Lyndon Johnson and the then Soviet premier Brezhnev, no, it was Kosygin, I'm sorry, not Brezhnev, had a summit meeting in Glassboro. And indeed, the military clamped down on the town. There was ultra-tight security. So we're now seeing almost a laboratory case of how people's memories, They remembered the clampdown, but at least some of them projected it back onto the UFO.
Yep.
This is one lesson that I think I've learned from ufology, which is that the solved UFO cases can be far, and are, I'm not going to hedge, far more instructive and interesting than the unsolved ones. The unsolved ones, we know nothing at all.
Yeah.
The solved ones, we have insights into how the human mind functions, how the human memory functions. And this is, to me, what ufology is about.
Now, okay, so it seems to me that you're saying, for the most part, or entirely, that UFOs are something that we create in our minds.
They are a human phenomenon. Now, having said that, I am not debunking them, because in my belief, you and I have, in these few square inches above our eyeballs, enough alienness to fill a universe. And we do not clearly understand what's going on in those square inches. Freud once called dreams the royal road to the unconscious. I would probably be exaggerating, but I think there's a glimmer of truth in the exaggeration if I said that I consider UFOs a royal road into some of the obscure corners of the human mind, I will even say the human soul, and at least consider that it may be something that transcends your individuality and mine.
Wow. Well, you know, the question I have for you right off the bat is, how does this I mean, I really love having all different types of opinions on what UFOs could be. So I welcome your opinion, but I do want to question you on how you come about this theory when you have a mass sighting, for instance, several hundred people, like the Phoenix Lights, we'll just go there, for instance. Maybe even thousands of people could have seen the object in the sky. How would that work in your thoughts?
Okay, I will answer that question with a question. How did the miracle of the sun work at Fatima in Portugal?
Uh-huh.
When I think it was tens of thousands
Yeah.
of people saw the sun dance and fall out of the sky. We know the sun did not fall out of the sky. Why did thousands of people share a vision of it falling out of the sky? I don't know the answer to that question, but I think that is the kind of question that ufology concerns itself with. Not why did the sun fall? It didn't fall. But why did thousands of sane, normal human beings see something that did not happen?
They saw different things there, too. Mary, Virgin Mary, right? Am I thinking about the same one?
Yeah, but that's a little tricky, as my friend Professor Jeff Krypau of Rice University has pointed out. The children who originally saw the lady saw her as a diminutive, beautiful lady. They did not say they had seen the Virgin Mary. That was a conventionalization imposed on their visions by the clerical authorities to whom they reported it. So what did they see? Now, I can imagine, I don't know if anybody's ever done this, but I can imagine somebody saying, oh, well, it was a space woman. What I propose is that the Virgin Mary and the space woman are both conventionalizations, both ways of taking a phenomenon that comes from outside our categories and shoehorning it into them.
Okay, well, let me ask you this. Have you ever personally had a UFO sighting?
No.
Okay.
But also, yes, because I did see lights over a tower when my wife and I were out walking. And I did see these very eerie lights circling over the tower. And I would not have known they were birds until Rose pointed that out to me.
I see. Okay. And so it's really hard from my perspective, who I have actually seen a UFO that I could not explain in any type of way. Now, I will tell you this. A UFO was the furthest thing from my mind. When I was young, I sort of was into them, because there was a flap in my area back in the 1960s and when I was a little kid. And so I remembered that and a few different TV shows I was interested in over the years. But I was just plain sitting in a hot tub recovering from surgery, and this disc flew over me that I just couldn't explain, no sound at all. And so how would my brain make that happen if it was like the furthest thing from my mind?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. I sometimes think that if you take the UFO believers on the one side and the debunkers on the other, the debunkers are right about the less important issue, and the believers are right about the more important issue. The debunkers are right. We do not have space hardware flying around our skies. The believers are right that there's a genuine mystery, which is vital for us. Just what the answer is, I don't know. If I may, though, I would like to give, my usual answer a question with a question.
Okay.
Okay. You know about the Belgian UFO?
Yes, the flap.
That the flap. It started on November 29th, 1989.
89, right? Okay.
89, and it continued with fluctuations until I think March of 1990. It was geographically restricted to Belgium. And what I'm about to say is not original with me. I wish it were, but it was discovered by my friend Eric Ouellet, Ouellet, and published in his wonderful book Illuminations. That it was the sightings seem to have been geographically restricted to Belgium. When you got to the French or the German border, people did not see UFOs anymore. There were many different types of UFOs, but the most common one was a triangle. This was really where the triangular UFO, there'd been sightings in the Hudson Valley, but it was in Belgium that in '89 that the triangular UFO made its mark on the UFO annals. At each corner, there was a bright white light and then a dimmer red light in the middle.
Right. Yeah.
People photographed these things. There was one good photograph of it, which turned out to be a hoax.
Yeah, the hoax is not. I can talk a little bit about that before when you finish your story.
Okay, and I may have to retract my story in the light of what you're about to say. But what the heck? We were all wrong at one time or another in our life. But apart from that, and you may correct me on that one, but apart from that, when people photographed these things they saw, what they got on their film was either blobs or nothing at all. So I'm supposing that by and large, people were seeing things that were not there. Now, what were they seeing? We'll bring up the ghost of Carl Jung, and he will tell us that they were seeing quaternities. Groups of 4 in which there are 3 that are identical and a 4th that is different. Along comes Eric Willett and puts this in historical context. November 9th, 1989, the Berlin Wall comes down. The communism continues more rapidly than before. It had started a bit earlier, but it continues crumbling in Central and Eastern Europe. So what people see in the sky is a dim red star, the symbol of communism, surrounded, enclosed, hemmed in by 3 white stars, the symbol of NATO, which had then, as now, its headquarters in Brussels. If you ask me what people are seeing, I would say they are seeing what they know to be happening around them, projected into the sky in symbolic form.
Wow. Huh. That's an interesting thought. And yeah, as far as the hoax part, there has been some research into that. I was speaking to Leslie Kane about that, and she knew something about. I'm trying to remember who it was that I was trying to find out who it was that took the picture, and Petit Rahine or something like that.
Yeah, it sounds familiar.
Yeah, but he was actually challenged to reproduce that, and he couldn't do it. He had said how he did it, and then they said, well, let's see you redo it, and he just absolutely couldn't do it. So there's it's still kind of one of those things that is on the fence, whether it's indeed a hoax or there was some other type of reason, and there was supposed to be some other type of reason where he may have been claiming that it had to do with money that he was going to be paid for it and didn't get paid for it to sell it. So there's some sour grapes going on there. It's interesting. So who knows about that picture? I don't know. What about pictures that are really, really good that have never been explained as fraud?
McMinnville, Oregon.
Right.
1950. I have no idea. I mean, it seems like fraud is the only reasonable explanation, but everybody who met what was his name? Paul Trent, I think his name was.
Right.
He and his wife regarded them as totally sincere.
Right.
So I don't know that. There are some cases I just can't explain. I mean, Socorro, New Mexico, April 24th, 1964. I have never seen a convincing explanation of that. I have got to go along with Phil Klass that it's a hoax, because I can't think of any other possible way of explaining it. But there's all sorts of reasons to doubt that.
Yeah, I mean, Lonnie Zamora was said to be one of the best witnesses. And Ray Stanford, who, investigated that case, wrote the book. He's definitely listening to this show. He might even want to call in later. So that, to me, is, it has been said as one of the, top 10, interesting UFO cases, to say the least.
I mean, I would accept Klass's view just for the want of any better alternative, but I think it stinks.
Right. So why do you find it... Now, I do want to go into how the religion, the connection and all that in a little bit here. But why do you find it so impossible after all these years that we could be visited by an outside intelligence?
As Ezekiel quotes the people he disapproves of as saying, "The days grow long and every vision faileth." Okay, I remember in the 1960s, we were all making confident predictions that soon human life would be transformed by these visitations. The earliest, the first UFO book to be published was Donald Kehoe's Flying Saucers Are Real, right? 1950. Mm-hmm. Kehoe describes in that book how he takes a plane and he thinks everyone's life, or they don't know it, but the life of everyone on this plane is going to be transformed. Now, I would be very surprised if any of the people Kehoe flew with are still alive. Maybe one or two. But they've lived their lives, I won't say uneventfully, but the extraterrestrial visitations had no impact. Year after year went by, and there was not the slightest bump on the seismograph of history. And so people have had to come up with counter histories in which, yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, but I've said that, and I don't expect to find out what these things are in my lifetime. I've said that, a number of times. But I do think a lot of people, sort of what you're talking about here, did expect and do expect to find out, and some people think, relatively soon. But let's just, devil's advocate here. Let's just say we are being visited. I'm not saying by an alien from somewhere else, but we're being visited by something. If that something was indeed actually physical and actually here, but didn't want us to, just wanted to observe only. And they were intelligent enough to be able to get away with that. Do you think that is even possible, or you just absolutely rule it out?
I think it's possible. And I remember when I was, I was as a teenager, I had to come up with answers to all the objections. And the old one, why don't they land on the White House lawn? Yeah. And the answer I gave is we can't put ourselves in their place and ask what we would do because we don't know what their place is. Now, It took years before I realized that robbed the extraterrestrial hypothesis of whatever explanatory power it might have. Because if there's beings from outer space and there is absolutely nothing we can say about them, then let's just say we don't know what they are. We get the same, it has the same result. The advantage of saying they're visitors from outer space is that we were able to start making predictions. They're casing us out, maybe to save us from ourselves, maybe to invade us. That was incidentally my belief, that they were hostile, they were here to invade us. But I knew perfectly well that I was not 1,000th afraid of the looming UFO invasion as I was of if I ever got the nerve to go up to a girl and ask her out, of hearing from her, "Go out with you! You want me to go out with you? Ha 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 ha!" And the next day the whole school knows it. Okay, that was what scared me. The UFOs didn't. So did I really believe? Or did I find the UFOs, as I think now, looking back, a convenient mirror for the genuinely terrifying invasion that was coming of my mother's weakening heart into our household?
Wow. So are you, how does this, I'm getting that you're thinking that it's more of a belief system.
Yeah. belief and experience. People have experiences. The people at Fatima had an experience. I won't talk about the Phoenix Lights because it seems to me that it's too undramatic a sighting to really interest me. But take the Reverend William Booth Gill, in Papua New Guinea. In June 1959, he and his parishioners had an experience. It cannot have been of extraterrestrial beings. Then why, if there is, why did they look so identical to humans? He thought they were humans, in fact. What did they see? Well, in one way, I think I know the answer. I mean, Marty Kottmeyer, who is, I would say, one of the finest ufologists writing and speaking, Marty Kottmeyer has plotted the positions of the UFOs that Gill and his parishioners saw and find that they correspond to those of exceptionally bright stars and planets. And the fact that they tended to come and go as clouds thickened and lightened would confirm that they were stars and planets. But why did multiple people see them close up with men standing on their decks?
Right. And then there was interaction with a flashlight.
Yeah.
So
why did that happen?
So this is another question thing.
Yeah. Okay. It's true. I have more questions than answers. I always did. Even when I was doing Judaic studies, I sometimes drove my students nuts. But about 7 years ago, I met a charming librarian in Western North Carolina, a very charming, very intelligent woman in her late 50s, though she looked much younger. And she talked to me about the UFO aliens she saw through her windows on her front lawn. And she said to me, I know they weren't really there, but I did see them. And I hold on to both halves of those statements. They weren't really there. She did see them. The people in Belgium saw through a dim red light surrounded by 3 bright white ones. What is this capacity we have to see these things? The people at Fatima saw the sun fall to earth. What's going on here?
But, okay, again, though, there were 2 police officers that saw one of... no, I'm sorry. Yes, there were 2 police officers, but the one that was more noted was a police officer off duty and his wife that both saw the triangle in Belgium. They watched it go over a field, and they're watching it together. And then... they both talk about it. It's the same thing. They both saw the same thing. How does that happen where 2 people together are seeing exactly the same thing? And I have more. There's many more cases like that.
The only answer I can give is that there's communication between them. Not necessarily verbal. There's something of the sort as what I think happened with the Reverend William Booth Gill and his parishioners. That they must say, hey, do you see that? Do you see that? And people communicate in the most subtle ways. I don't really believe in telepathy. But if you wanted to say that there's some, I don't know, I don't think we need to get to telepathy. I prefer to go to more economical explanations. I think there must be some sort of unconscious communication, some sort of triggering in me that comes from the other person. We could talk in this connection, by the way, of Betty and Barney Hill.
Okay, let's hear your thoughts. And I did want to. That was one of the topics I was going to bring up. What your thoughts were on all the people that are claiming that they're being abducted. But let's talk first of all about Betty and Barney Hill. Your thoughts on that?
Okay, first of all, I have been quite persuaded by a blog post by one James McDonald, who followed the road that Betty and Barney Hill.
I know the particular one you're talking about.
Yes.
The light on the mountain
Exactly.
that had been there since the 50s and all that. Yes.
Right, and then was torn down, as I found out from Googling the following year, after
really?
McDonald
Wow.
took his trip. Yet, a light on a hill does not appear as a disc with faces behind the portal. It does not create such terror in one of the experiencers that the skeptical psychiatrist is afraid that he's going to throw himself out the window. So there's something, I have to say, well, the way I would put it, and I have put it in my blogs, is to say that the light that the hills saw was this light on the mountain. The UFO was not a light on the mountain. The UFO came from within. Now, if you ask, how did Barney Hill come to, and how did his family get to this country? I don't know the answer, but I think I can get a pretty good guess. They were abducted in the middle of the night and carried on to an alien ship.
You're talking about his forefathers' slavery, the slave trade?
Yeah, and I'm not, when I talk about an alien ship, I'm not exaggerating. That people writing about the slave trade in the 18th century spoke about what they call the great machine of the slave ship, and about the slave seeing sights on it he can't possibly begin to understand. Not the slave, the abductee. Okay, and there are other details of what Barney and Betty remembered that seemed to fit the pattern of these historic abductions. Betty Hill, you remember how the UFO beings try to get her teeth out?
Well, I don't remember that in particular. I know that there was a big needle and all that. But I don't remember that in particular. But yeah, okay.
Well, the needle is interesting for other reasons. I think this is an attempt to kill the fetus that the black man has put inside her.
And that was a psychological situation, you're thinking?
I think so. These people were, I'm going to use the word obsessed, but it's totally unfair, because these people, with immense courage, fell in love and married and lived as an interracial couple in early 1960s New England. They took their trip hardly more than 6 years after Emmett Till was lynched in Mississippi for supposedly making lewd remarks, suggestive remarks to a white woman. So naturally, these people are haunted by the racial past of America. And Barney actually explains the things he sees. He looks through the windows of the UFO. He sees a red-headed Irishman. Now go tell me that a spaceship from another galaxy is going to have a red-headed Irishman on it. But when asked why a red-headed Irishman, Barney knows. Irish people usually don't like Negroes. So when I find an Irish person who is friendly, I will try to be friendly. But then the friendly Irishman disappears and is replaced by a black-jacketed Nazi. Also, inappropriate for an intergalactic spaceship, but totally inappropriate for a well-read, sensitive, humane man who is wrestling with the manifold humiliations of being a black in early 60s America, being married to a white woman, and who also, in my opinion, carries with him collective memories of what befell his ancestors. And if you want to press me on what I mean by collective memory, I will answer.
Okay, well, I feel like I have to. But, and then there's some other questions I have for you. Go ahead.
Okay, that therapists working with the children of Holocaust survivors have repeatedly come across the phenomenon that the experience of the parents is in some way or another reenacted by the child, even if there was never an explicit narrative of it. There is something in the interactions that conveys to the child more vividly than a narration could what the parent underwent, and the child identifies with it and lives through it. Now, granted, we are talking here about one generation, but I'm willing to speculate that it can endure through the generations.
Multi-generational.
Yeah. And I would add that it is now being increasingly accepted that there is epigenetic transmission of the suffering of the ancestors in the descendants. And we're moving closer and closer to Carl Jung here.
Okay. So, there's other types, I'm sure you're very aware. There's radar information. There's other sightings that are more involved, and one of them I've told a number of times on this show, probably 3-4 times, and that is, it's basically my girlfriend's father was driving. I go to Russia. I've been to Russia several times. So about 10 years ago, he was driving through a pass in Russia, and traffic is always a nightmare there. Cars in front of him, cars behind him, and every single car stalled. They all died. They had to pull over to the side of the road. People were lifting up their hoods, looking at their engines, trying to figure out what was going on. And all of a sudden, this cigar-shaped craft floated right over them with portholes. And they're all staring at it. They're all like, oh, my God, what's that? And then it floated away, and then someone eventually jumped in one of the cars, and it started, and all the cars started up, and they all drove away. Now, there's a number of cases where, and my girlfriend's father absolutely was not into UFOs. It just happened to him. There's a number of cases where there are stalls, and there are things that happen similar to that. How would you explain that coming out of the psyche?
I don't know.
I was thinking you'd probably say that.
Yeah, you've sort of gotten the pattern. But now, okay, I've given with one hand, but I'm going to try to take back with the other.
Okay.
And that is that the cigar-shaped object with the portholes was also seen in 1968 with the Zond 4 re-entry. You know that the Soviet satellite Zond 4, it was sent up, and it apparently was a major fiasco, that it did not go into orbit as it should have. It re-entered the Earth's atmosphere. And there were huge numbers of UFO sightings that night, including cigar-shaped objects with portholes, people convinced that it was so close that I could have almost reached out and touched it. One woman, and this is what I find absolutely fascinating, she described how her dog was terrified and went hiding, whimpering. Why? Was it the sight of the thing in the sky? Or did the dog pick up, and there's at least one other case of this, did the dog pick up something about his mistress's, something strange happening to his mistress? She then described how she had to lie down and sleep. She couldn't keep her eyes open, even though she'd gotten a good night's rest. This woman was a PhD and a science teacher at a high school. We are not dealing here with a lightweight. Something about that light in the sky, that we know what it was, triggered reactions in her. Now, how will this explain the stalling cars? It seems to me with very great difficulty. Because I'm prepared to say that somebody seeing something bizarre in the sky might nervously stall his or her car.
Yeah, but it happened after.
Multitudes do it.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into how there is how this ties into religion, or does it at all?
Fatima's already given you your answer.
Mm-hmm.
That what the UFO represents to me is a religious vision. A UFO sighting is a religious experience. UFO belief is a religious doctrine which transmits. I'm going to use the word myth, but you must understand I am using myth in the Jungian sense, not of something false, but of something profoundly true. A kind of collective dream of the society of the species. So, yeah, in those respects, I see the UFO as a profoundly religious phenomenon to be explored by those of us, professional or amateur or anyone, who cares about religion and what it means for human beings.
Well, let's explore a little bit what it was your study. You were a professor of religion. What is religion, and why the connection?
Oh boy. Okay, you can already anticipate. I don't know, but and that is my answer. But I need to refine that, because I'm not alone in my ignorance there. I mean, people have been arguing for centuries about what religion. Well, maybe not centuries, many decades, about what religion is. For the purposes of talking about UFOs, I would say it is the direct experience and the transmission of narratives about a transcendent world just beyond ours, intersecting with ours, yet normally inaccessible to ours. Now, when I say that, all sorts of religion professors are going to start saying, no, you've got to talk about ritual, you've got to talk about religious institutions. And in these respects, I don't think UFOs are very religious. I don't think I guess you've got the Church of the Raelians or something like that. But by and large, I don't think ufology is a church. And I mean, when it's called a cult, that's simply a bit of verbal abuse. So I'm going to focus on that aspect of religion that deals with the intersection between our world and the transcendent. But heck, I might be able to make a case that that's where the crux of religion is. And all the churches and all the rituals and all the holidays are ways of celebrating, conventionalizing, and memorializing that.
Interesting. Now, I heard you say on another interview that, religion, a lot of religion, of what religion is because we're an intelligence that knows we're going to die.
Yes.
And how does that fit into the UFO topic? How does that shoehorn into the whole thing?
Well, first of all, you already know from what I've said
About
that
your
I have a
mother?
bias. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
That what UFOs were to me was a Perseus's mirror in which I could look at the Medusa of death and not turn to stone. But that was just me. But I would ask you to consider, and a lot of people have been very skeptical of this, and with good reason, but consider there is one UFO story that everybody in this country and possibly the world knows, even if they don't know any other.
Roswell.
And that's,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
and what is Roswell about? But death.
Huh.
People, religious studies scholars occasionally have written about Roswell. There was an anthropologist at Brandeis, who published a book in 1997, UFO Crash at Roswell. Well, they think they know what it's all about. You know, it's gods from the sky. But how many of the classic myths have the gods from the sky, childlike, vulnerable, and dead? As I once wrote, the Greeks imagined the gods were immortal. The ufologists know better.
Wow. All right, let me ask you this, too. So you were investigating UFOs all the way back in the 60s, young and all that. Now, can you talk about how it transpired as time went on into what your beliefs are now? How did that progress?
Well, I retired from ufology the way many of us teen ufologists did. I went to college. Okay, and it's, what you just asked is a really, really good question. I've described that I had the reality of UFOs came to me as a sudden epiphany when I read Gray Barker. The belief faded very slowly, and interest faded before the belief did. I remember, does the name Isabel Davis mean anything to you?
No.
She wrote, she was co-author, I think, of a monograph on the Kelly Hopkinsville case of 1955. She was a wonderful, peppery lady in her 60s, back in the 60s. She lived in Greenwich Village. I used to visit her occasionally, and I remember writing a letter to her at the end, the summer after my freshman year, explaining to her why I no longer wanted to research UFOs. It wasn't I'd stopped believing it. I still believed in them. I still believed they were extraterrestrial visitors, but I'd concluded there was no way we could know anything about them until they chose to reveal themselves to us, which might, as I said, happen tomorrow, or it might happen 100 years from now. So there's just no point in my investigating them. There's nothing I can find out. Very, very slowly, my belief faded. And then I met Jacques Vallée.
Huh.
This was in 1970. Jacques was a young computer scientist at Stanford University. I was in California at the time, working for a professor who introduced me to Jacques. I read Passport to Magonia, and I thought, this is the man who has the answer. That we are dealing with some phenomenon beyond our understanding, and fairies, dwarves, visions of God, extraterrestrial beings, they're always, we force them into conventional categories. I did eventually become more skeptical than Jacques was and is, and insisted that they're all a human phenomenon. Meanwhile, I was accepted to graduate school at Berkeley. And what did I study at Berkeley? I studied the visions of Ezekiel. I studied religious traditions of heavenly ascensions and otherworldly journeys. I wrote my early books on a form of Jewish mysticism, which I can now see has a lot in common, not only with primitive shamanism, but also with UFO abductions. And all the time, I realized I was doing the kind of ufology which can get you tenure. And once I got tenure, I came out of the closet, as it were, and said, this is ufology. What did it mean to me? What does it mean to millions of other people?
Interesting. You know, there's people that are philosophizing the other way around. In other words, the Bible, and for instance, the Bible, there's a lot of UFO or extraterrestrial type of suggestions. So they're actually putting it the other way around, that that aliens were here and they visited us, and then it's in the Bible in different tones.
Which to me is one more conventionalization. That Ezekiel sees something. I've never known what it is, what it was. I will call it a UFO, but not meaning a spaceship. I mean by that the unidentified. What doesn't fit into Ezekiel's categories. He tries to shoehorn it in by saying, I saw visions of God. And somebody who later added some passages to his book tried to do the conventionalization one step further by saying that it's really the furniture of the Jerusalem temple come to life. Now you get people like Blumrich and a man named Arthur Orton, who's forgotten now, but who did it better than anybody else has ever done it, saying he saw extraterrestrial beings. I don't believe any of them. I say that he saw the unidentified, and that unidentified came from inside him.
I also heard, now I guess if anyone would ever know, you would know, is the King James Bible, or maybe it was before that, introduced the miracles into it. Do you know anything about that? Like the miracles were added later to get more interest, or to make it more interesting.
Well, maybe somebody did it, but it wasn't King James's team.
Okay, well there was earlier, maybe the Romans, perhaps, or and I'm a lay person when it comes to this stuff, so forgive me if I'm really going way off in the wrong direction.
As far back as we can trace the Bible text, the miracles are the core.
Is that right? They were the core.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, there's no way you can reconstruct the story of the Exodus without miracles.
Now, do you think these miracles are on the same path as what people are talking about when they talk about UFOs?
Well, surely the miracle of the sun at Fatima was. Now, were the miracles of the Bible? I don't know. Once again, because Fatima is part of modern history.
Right.
There are photos of the crowds watching the sun. So this is well documented. But when Elisha saw a fiery chariot come from heaven and snatch up Elijah and carry him away, I don't know that Elisha saw any such thing. I can say very easily that it's a legend about him. I can't say that with Ezekiel, because to me there's no way of making sense of the first chapter of Ezekiel except by saying that it's precisely what it claims to be, a first-person account of an experience by the experiencer. But the miracles of Elijah, the miracles of Moses, I can say they're later legends. The miracles of Jesus, I'm not so sure, because a lot of Jesus's healings are perfectly explicable in terms of illnesses that come from the mind.
Now, okay. Now, someone put it in the chat room here, and it's similar to what I asked you earlier, but I'll still ask this question for this particular person. They want me to ask you why non-believers of UFOs unexpectedly witness a phenomena, and they tell their neighbor, and their neighbor actually said, I saw it too. How does, and I know you said something about there's some type of quiet communication going on, but let's just say there are witnesses in different areas seeing the same thing, in one sighting, one night. There's many cases like that.
Well, that happened with the Zon 4 fragments. But I still think it's a legitimate question, and in some ways a very difficult one. And I would need to examine the precise case. Now, there are cases that cut in the opposite direction. Kevin Randall reported on a very important one in the International UFO Reporter of a young couple that were in their car, and they saw a light coming down to Earth. The young man remembered it as a light. And later on, Randall was able to identify it as the lights of an airplane landing. The young woman saw it as a disk, illuminated from within, in which she could see two human-like figures. And Randall was able to trace how this memory blossomed. Appropriately, he called his article UFOs on Memory Lane. So there we've got a different case of a multiply witnessed sighting in which one witness sees a full-fledged UFO, which fits into some very familiar typologies that I don't know that there's any evidence that this young woman knew about. And the man does not. Now, what I am itching to ask is, what was the relationship of this young man and this young woman?
I see.
And because when a young man and a young woman are in a car together, well, I tend to assume that sex is at least something somewhere on people's minds. How did that play into this? Once again, I don't know.
Okay, now let's talk about the belief. I've heard you mention that a number of times, and I know my friend Sam Moranto gets all upset when people ask, "Do you believe in UFOs?" And I can't remember what his term is. He's something like it has nothing to do with belief. But what does it have to do with belief?
That I don't understand your question.
What is the belief of UFOs? I mean, do you think it's a belief that people are hanging on to, or what do you, what's your thoughts on that?
I'm more inclined to think it is an unconscious awareness bursting out in them.
Interesting. An unconscious, and it just, you mentioned earlier that people talked about fairies and, leprechauns and things like that. So do you think this is just a contemporary manifestation, or?
Cross out the word just, and it's close to what I think. Because the last thing I intend to do is belittle the phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's immensely important. I think religion is immensely important. I think fairy beliefs are immensely important.
Do you think that there'll be something else later Another, something else, maybe to do with popular culture at the time, will start, take the place of UFOs?
Oh, I wish I were a prophet. I could tell that. But it struck me that UFOs are changing even now. Not only what people see, but if you put on a Google, what do you call it, notification, so you get emails when things about UFOs appear. What I'm finding everywhere, UFO festivals are springing up.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen that phenomenon? We just had the UFO festival in Exeter, New Hampshire.
Yeah, I couldn't make it, and I'm only a few miles away from there. I was busy over the weekend, so
there was nothing like that when I was a kid.
Right.
UFOs fun for the family. And then you notice, by the way, this is a riddle that Kottmeyer worked on. And I don't know that his solution is very convincing. But you notice in all these UFO festivals, you've got UFO aliens that sort of look like the Greys, except they're green. Nobody ever sees little green men.
No, only, like you said, the Kelly, Hopkinville. That's the only time they ever talked about it. Now, I just, someone in the chat room asked if they could call in, so we may be taking a call. And you are welcome to call in. 09RJA is his handle. So we may be getting a call coming in. And if so, I will take the call and try to connect. Now, what about other phenomena, paranormal? Do you think are you thinking along the same lines when people talk about ghosts, they talk about Bigfoot, they talk about, all these other things that people see besides, a lot of times people don't like me putting UFOs in that same category, but what's your thoughts about all that?
I don't know enough to have any informed opinions.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that it's likely that the phenomenon of people genuinely seeing things that are not there is cropping up in all of those experiences.
Now, did Carl Jung indicate that this is some type of preservation, or why people do this?
He thought that the UFO is a mandala. And you know that the basic Jungian idea is that as human beings, we arrange our experience according to certain patterns that are inborn, which he called the archetypes. And the mandala, the circle or the disc, is one of his archetypes, which he took as the inclusion, meaning the inclusion and reconciliation of opposites. And he looked out on a world torn between the West and communism, a world on the brink, always on the brink of nuclear catastrophe, as it looks like we're getting back to, a world in which science arrogated to itself total authority over truth and wisdom, and he saw something emerging from our unconscious that said, whoa, this is not all there is. So for him, UFOs were a wonderfully positive phenomenon.
Interesting. So we're going to have a call come in here in just a second. And I apologize, I put the wrong phone number up in the chat room. And that number is 603-967-4030. And you're welcome to call in. So this person's calling right in. And No, I'm finding this topic really interesting. I'm not saying I'm agreeing with you 100%, but I still find it fascinating. And I'm one of the first people to say that I have absolutely no idea what's going on. And we have a call coming in. I'm going to join the call now. Hello, caller. Welcome to the show, and please identify yourself and tell us where you're calling from.
Hey, Martin. This is Ryan again from South Carolina.
Oh, yes. I think you're one of my only callers. No, we have the gentleman from the UK calls a number of times. So thanks for calling. Do you have a question for our guest, Ryan?
I do. The resident skeptic is called. Let me see. I guess my question is, I don't know, maybe I've missed it perhaps, but I guess my question is, I don't know if it's been covered yet or not, but UFOs and religious art, what is your guest's take on that? A lot of it shows up in some of the Renaissance era, medieval era, and I'm just wondering what his take on that is.
Yeah, I mean, there is a painting in Italy that is known as, I think, La Madonna del UFO, which the Virgin Mary with something that looks like a UFO in the sky. Now, the art historians will say, okay, the only reason why we're saying those are UFOs is that people don't read the Bible anymore. And that what these seemingly UFO-like objects are representations of something that would have been completely clear to Bible believers, that they're not included in the paintings at random, but in order to symbolize some message. Now, does this make them irrelevant to today's UFOs? I don't think so. Because if the UFO is a religious phenomenon, then I would expect it to have some resemblance to religious symbolism in earlier time.
Oh, I'm not sure what's going on. I'm hearing some feedback. Ryan?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, please make sure your computer is muted.
It is.
Okay, very good. So is that it, Ryan, or did you have a follow-up question?
No, that's all I had.
All right, thank you. Now, I know that I did watch someone that was explaining very similar to what David just mentioned on YouTube that was found in these paintings. And so if you search long enough, you will find that it's very interesting. It's a very interesting take on what these things are in all those paintings. I think it's a three-part series, I believe.
Right.
I was trying to think of an example, and one that came to me is one where you see what looks like a disc, some sort of in front of the sun. And the clue as to what this means is that there's a reference to one of the Psalms. And the biblical verse turns out to be, "Ye who believe in the Lord, trust in the Lord, He is your help and your shield." So that what we're looking at, I'm tempted to say, is not a UFO, but a symbolic shield. But then I'll flip it around and say, what if the UFO that people see today is itself a symbol like that shield?
Interesting. All right, Ryan.
The thing that kind of makes me doubt it might represent UFOs is looking at the time, you doubt the church would allow anything in to a painting that would contradict their POV that the earth is the center of the universe, we're the only sentient beings alive, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I would agree completely. I agree completely with that point, and I would add that they would not have allowed, and the painter would not have put in details that were just inexplicable to him. All of his details would have been something that we may not be able to decode now, but which in his time were allusions to some sort of important religious doctrines.
Very good. I appreciate the call, Ryan. That was a very good point to bring up. And again, we are taking calls. If anyone else wants to give us a ring and ask our guest a question. Now, as far as other things when it comes to connections like the paintings that he brought up, I don't know if there's any other religious connections to, people from other, extraterrestrial or star children. When you hear that type of thing, do you believe that's mostly like in Native American? Is it along the same lines, do you think, of a belief?
It would make sense to me that the star children are some part of a transcendent order that intersects with ours, yet we don't have access to it.
Interesting. So now, as far as your book, let's talk a little bit about that. And you're saying that's a novel, so that is not. I was thinking that was you describing your story as a young investigator. So let's talk a little bit. What is that exactly about?
What is that? Well, I've been asked, is this novel autobiographical? And I came up with an answer, which is that. Well, let me see if I can remember it.
Or is it a question?
Is this autobiographical?
Okay.
And the answer is, well, the car chases, the intergalactic sex, and the descent into the netherworld are all autobiographical. Other parts, however, I made up. Okay, the novel is autobiographical in that it deals with a narrator, a very unreliable narrator, whose mother is dying. And that a story is coming from inside him that partly reflects, partly transcends the tragedy he feels impending. Now, where did I get that story from? Its starting point was fantasies and dreams I remember having as a teenager. When I was about 14 or 15, I dreamed that I was in this rambling old house in the country at a meeting of hyper-serious teenagers who were interested not in parties and dances, but in exploring the realms that lay beyond the edges of science. And among them was a beautiful blonde in an evening dress. And then I woke up. In the novel, I follow what would have happened if I didn't wake up.
Following your dreams, as they say.
As they say.
So, for the number of people that, like, for instance, in the chat room, we're seeing over and over again, UFOs are real. What do you say to that person? Is it just, and I've heard, I'm a little bit confused, I have to say, by what you're saying, because you say they're important, and you don't want to debunk, UFOs, but also I'm getting that they're something that is part of our psyche.
Does that make them less real? The UFOs that the Belgians saw, are those unreal? It's very medieval, by the way, the seeing in the sky, emblems of what you know is going on around you or what you can feel going on around you. Are those emblems unreal? I personally don't think so. But it may be a matter of definition. Some people will say, unless they're nuts and bolts, unless you can knock on them with a hammer, if they get close enough, then they're not real. I think Jung would say it a little bit differently, and I guess I am a bit of a Jungian.
Now, Ben Hansen I speak to now and then. I don't know if you've ever heard of his name. There was a show called Fact or Fake. And he was a former FBI agent and has been researching UFOs for many years. Interesting guy. And his story is his grandfather was involved in some secret part of the military at Wright-Patterson, and he would disappear for a while at a time, and you couldn't reach him. Nobody could reach him, or he told, don't even try to reach me or whatever when I'm doing these things. Well, on his deathbed, basically he held his father's hand, and he said, something I have to tell you, and that is, we're not alone. What do you think of when someone from the military comes out that supposedly had, some type of information and comes out and says something like that? Do you think that do you personally think he was trying to comfort his son in a way, or what would be your thoughts?
I doubt it. I think he's remembering something, experiencing something. But I think probably not something that's taking place in the external world. Interesting.
Well, it's been a real fun night. I really enjoyed speaking with you, and I really found it very, very interesting. And go ahead, and your website is your name, right?
Yeah, davidhalperin.net.
Okay. And where can they find the name of your book one more time, and where can someone find it?
Journal of a UFO Investigator. It's in some libraries. And I hate to say this, but on Amazon, I think they'll be able to find it very easily.
Yes.
So I'm sorry. I don't want to give a plug for Amazon, but I think that's the place to go.
I will ask you this, because a number of people that have been on the shows over the years offer this. I don't know if you do or not. If someone wanted a signed copy of the book, can they contact you on your website?
Yes. Now I'm just looking over, craning my neck to see how many copies I've got left.
I better call soon. Okay.
So I make no promises, but certainly I'll be glad to hear from anybody. I can tell them that if I do send them a signed copy, it will be a gift.
Okay.
I will not charge them for it. If they want to pay, they have to go to Amazon. But I'm not sure. I don't know how many copies I need to hold on to.
Excellent.
So let's leave that. But I would be quite delighted to hear from any of your listeners on my website.
Okay. Another thing that happens, and if you wanted to check YouTube, this stays up on YouTube just the way it happened, and we do get a lot of comments, so you're welcome to check that out. Some good, some bad, but you definitely you want to check that out sooner or later. Thanks so much, David. I really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much, Martin. I enjoyed it immensely.
Excellent.
God bless.
All right. Have a good night.
Same to you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. That's it. Thank you so much if you were listening live, or thank you so much if you're a supporter of the show and you're listening to this as a 2-hour podcast. So next week, we'll be back with my good friend, Chris Lambright. That is, if he's in Texas. I haven't talked to him, and I'm hoping that he is absolutely okay. So I'll touch base with him. But as it stands right now, it'll be Chris Lambright, and he'll be back. We'll be back next week at the regular time, which is 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. All right, everyone. Thanks so much, and remember to keep your eyes to the sky.